If you don't have a healthy team, you can't build a company off of an unhealthy team.
Does this align with what I want this company to continue to be?
You can only make $1,000 if you're willing to bet 100. Right? You can only make $10,000 if you're willing to lose 1,000.
And today I am with Joseph Druther.
If you don't have a good foundation, you can't build very high.
I realized that and I was like, I need to change the way that I'm doing some things.
When you've got the right team, they really kind of step up during those times.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Diehard Entrepreneur Stories. I am Devin Ramos, your host, and today I am with Joseph Druther, a real estate entrepreneur and the visionary behind Druther Homes, a company specializing in high-end new construction real estate. With a background deeply rooted in the trades, Joseph left college to return to plumbing and real estate, buying his first fixer-upper at 19 with his wife, Liz. Over the years, he expanded his portfolio to include 194 apartment units, some short-term rentals, and residential developments. His journey has been one filled with challenges, including the firing of 2 of his top executives and restructuring his leadership team. Today, he'll share lessons on leadership, team culture, and scaling a real estate business. Joseph, welcome to the show, man.
Devin, I am so stoked to be here. So good to be here catching up with you, man.
Absolutely, dude. I look forward to it, man. So, Joseph, as we jump into it, man, can you remind me of really where you were at? I know you were working in the trades, but how you actually jumped into your first real estate investment and sort of how that kind of took off from there, man.
Yeah. So long story short, my wife and I, we'd been dating at the time for about 5 years. And so we were high school sweethearts. We started dating and we were ready to get married at 19. So we were trying to figure out how we were going to do this thing called life. We were going over budgets. We are not going to make it in the real world. I was a plumber. We didn't make that much money at all. It was not a great time in the economy. So anyways, my father-in-law happened to do a home inspection for an old friend of his. There was this really beat up, fire damaged house. Terrible. I mean, the whole thing was burnt to a crisp, had a flock of turkeys living in it, had a skylight the size of the living room and dining room. Like you walked in and it was just sky. Like you didn't, and we're like, this is perfect. Like we can fix this up. And the lady was selling it. She sold it for lot value minus the tear down cost. And, me being in the trades and my family's background was the trades and my in-laws were all tradesmen. And we looked at it and it's like, we can fix this. And this is the only thing that I can afford. And so it was $12,000. We bought it. It was a brick ranch. It was 1,000 square foot brick ranch for 12. So if you can have any, if you have any idea, like in your head, like it was really, really bad. So, we bought it through a mixture of $6,000 of creative financing. So she did owner financed $6,000. I used my mom's motorcycle as collateral to get a $3,500 private bank loan. We got a little, we borrowed some money from my father-in-law. I had a little bit of savings. I mean, we just cobbled together, we didn't realize it was called creative financing at the time, but it was as creative as you could get for a measly $12,000 purchase. It was hilarious, but it was everything that we could do just to get into this. And then we started fixing it up and through a ton of hard work and a ton of support from my family and friends. Everybody kind of gathered around and supported us and said, "Oh, you're doing this thing." Ton of people chipped in to help with their labor and their time. And we basically got it to a point where it was quote unquote livable. And so that's when we moved into it. Still had no HVAC, had no, we basically had to redo all the mechanicals and redo the framing on the roof structure where it was all burnt. And, but we couldn't afford windows, couldn't afford HVAC, couldn't afford, we basically had a bathroom and a kitchen that was cleaned up. We basically oven cleaned, used oven cleaner on the cabinets just to get the burnt stuff off. And that's what we lived in for a while. But over the years, that was kind of a slow fixer upper for us. We knew that was kind of what started us on our journey, right? So we were 19. Every dollar that we got from a paycheck was going towards that house. I'd get $400 in my paycheck. I'd go to Lowe's and I'd buy more drywall, or I'd buy more insulation, or I'd buy paint or whatever. That's what we did for years, fixing it up. And kind of in tandem with that, like we didn't know how to make a lot of money at the time. Like we didn't know how to increase our earning capacity. Cause like I said, I was just a plumber. Like I was digging ditches and growing in crawl spaces. Like I didn't know what I was doing. But we started educating ourselves. So we didn't pay for any, TV. We had like the cheapest phone plans that we could possibly get. And we just like read books. And so we were reading Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And we're like, wow, look how much you could make in real estate. And, Dave Ramsey's A Total Money Makeover. We were just like as tight as could be. And, that's what we were doing. The Millionaire Next Door and the Millionaire Mindset and, all these things. And so that's kind of how we got started in it. And then about five years later, because of the foundation that we were able to build there, where when I tell you we were tight, like we were tight. Like we had like a $25 going out to eat budget for the month, and we could do that like 3 times. Like we could stretch $1. We knew how to order rice and one burrito, extra rice, extra beans, like split all the stuff. That was our life for a while. But we were building equity the entire time in this house, and we knew we were. And we're like, wow, this house is now worth $100,000. Like that's more money than I quote unquote had made at my real job, making, $14, $15 an hour at the time. And so that was kind of our foundation. And then in 2015, we bought our first real flip because, we were able to use the equity from our first house. Like we got a home equity line of credit. We put a little addition on it. We paid that off. We got another increased line of credit. And then we were able to take that. We had a $100,000 line of credit, and we were able to buy and flip our first real, quote unquote, real house, back in 2015. And then 2016, we sold at the beginning of 2016. I stayed at my job for like 2 more months, walking around like I owned the place because I'm like, I could leave here today. And I don't need you. I'm a real thing.
You had all the leverage.
Oh man, all of it.
I love
all
it,
of it. Because we knew how to live on nothing. At that time we had 1, 2, 3. We had 3 kids at the time when I quit my job, but we knew how to live on nothing because we built that foundation. And so I was like, I'm done with this job. It was a terrible, terrible job. It was a springboard at the time. We used it for what it was good for. It was a springboard for us to get into where we are now. But yeah, I quit that job in the beginning of 2016 and like never looked back. So that was how we got into it,
Yeah. Oh
After
my gosh.
one flip, I was like, I'm a real estate investor. Like I went to the banks. I was like, hey, I've got this business plan. I'm going to flip house. And they're like, okay, great. Like, what kind of income do you have? Like, well, I just quit my job. You just quit your job? I'm like, yeah, no, I just quit my job. They're like, yeah, come back to me in like 3 years.
Like, yeah, that's not how it works.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah,
dude, that's awesome though. But what it sounds like though, is through that process, so you just made the comment, you said, well, I did one flip and I was ready to quit my job. At the same time though, man, it sounds like you guys were really building skills. Like all these things that you're doing, like just creating discipline on how you stretch $1. I'm sure that served you in business. All the different construction aspects of flipping that house, like the finance part, like all that stuff. It sounds like you were developing that over time. So it seems like that season was preparing you to be able to say, hey, you know what? Yeah, we've only flipped one house. We're on our second one, but I'm ready to jump into this and make it a thing.
100%, man. It was, it really was. I mean, it was a time of learning for us. We were reading a ton of books. We were listening to Bigger Pockets, all the typical stuff, right? We were getting our education. All the while I was in the trades. I was learning from other contractors in the industry. I was learning from other tradesmen. I was on the job, so I knew houses. And so, for us, we kind of looked at our cards. And I always tell people this too, whenever they're talking about like, well, what should I do? And I'd never try to tell people to take my path because my path was very unique to me. Your path is going to be unique to you. So I just say look at the cards you have. Like, what are you strong in? You've got a background in the trades, or you got a dad with a bunch of money. Like, don't be ashamed of that. Utilize it. That's a card that you can play, right? Like, and figure out what cards you have. And all the meanwhile, through those years, we were just kind of stacking our deck and figuring, okay, we're learning how to stretch $1. We're learning how to, deal with fire damage stuff. We're learning how to, talk with investors. We're learning how to find deals. We're just kind of building those disciplines, and that grit. And then when it was time to play our hand. We were like, yeah, we can do this, because, by that time we flipped our first house. It was a home run deal. It was a raccoon infested deal. We wound up making like $74,000 on that deal. And that was more money than I had made the year before, multiple years combined. And so, we were sitting on like over $100,000 in the bank account. And I was like, my mind was just kind of blown. And I could live for years off of this. Like, we could literally because we knew how to live on nothing, like absolutely nothing. And so I was like, well, worst comes to worst, I don't do anything for 2 years and I go back and get a job at the nuke plant. And I'm like, okay, that's worst comes to worst. But yeah, that time of preparation and building a foundation that allowed us to do what we do now. Now, my younger self would look at who I am today and say, you're wasting all this money. Because I spend money, but my mindset has changed and I've grown to a different place where I know how to make more money now. So I'm willing to spend money to make money. But yeah, I think back to my younger days when I was, my wife would drive around with the car without air conditioning because we weren't willing to spend the few $100 to fix it, or we'd have cardboard over the windows. And I'm like, man, that younger self he'd be yelling at me right now. But it was a part of the journey. It's part of what got us to where we are now. You can't just microwave the process and jump to where we are now,
Yeah, no, dude, you're so right. And as you're saying that, I was thinking to myself a little bit, because, it sounds like you guys were very conservative initially, and, that's great. Like, nothing wrong with that. You were developing a skill, and I relate to that because so was I. And then there was a certain point where I was like, hey, if I want to continue to make the impact that I want to grow like I want to grow, like, I have to start learning to be an investor, and I have to take risk. And so like this last year, I lost right around like $60,000 from failed marketing attempts, and I'm talking like no ROI, and it sucks. Like, it hurt for sure. So I'm telling my wife this, and she gets some of the details right, because she's not as active in our real estate companies. And she's basically like, you bonehead, like, what are you doing? And I'm like, hey, slow down, relax. Like, I'm in a different place now. Like, I made some bets, and, on one of those bets, I was like, okay, worst case scenario, if I see this full thing through, it's a 6-month period, I'm going to spend $24,000 and I'll have zero return. That's exactly what happened, but it was calculated. If the bet would have went the opposite direction, I would have made 4x on that $24,000. So
I think this learning is one of the rules of risk mitigation is you don't take bets where the downside outweighs the upside, right? But you learn those things only, you have to take bets. You have to be able to place bets, and you can only make $1,000 if you're willing to bet 100, right? You can only make $10,000 if you're willing to lose 1,000, and so on and so forth, right? And so, yeah, it's funny because we were having the conversation last night, Liz was, because we were getting prepped we're hiring some marketing, some people to help us with branding and some different stuff. And she's like, I said, well, how much is it going to be? And I'm the guy in the marketing seat and in the sales and marketing seat, but she's been helping out, and she's like, oh, it's like 25 grand. I'm like, 25 grand. And I was kind of taken aback. One, because I wasn't expecting that much, but for two, from her, because she's always she's still held on to a lot of those tight tendencies. She doesn't buy the salad spinner because she's like, oh, the salad is $20. I don't want to buy the salad spinner. I'll just pat it dry with paper. That's her through and through, right? It's amazing to have that. But when I was like, you agreed to spend 25 grand on, and I'm like, okay, well, you've grown a lot. That's awesome. But that's what it takes, and it takes those bets and but now, yeah, we're just placing those kinds of bets now. Yeah, calculated bets, but also they've got more zeros behind it, and the upside is more zeros behind it,
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. Dude, I love that. So, man, it seems like you went very quickly from, hey, I can see the vision of the future of this. I can do this full time. We can start flipping to boom. All of a sudden we're doing it. And what did it look like to get from flipping some houses? I don't know how many you were doing or how large your operation was, to like the new construction, and I think you do some development deals too. Why don't you just share with us, everything it is you do and in sort of that transition, what that looked like for you?
Yeah. So it all happened really, really fast. In hindsight, in the middle of it, the middle of it, it felt like it was like taking forever. Right. So, it is kind of funny how, what is it? A minute with a pretty girl seems like a second, but a minute with your hand on the hot stove seems like an eternity. Right. Like it's all a matter of perspective, but hindsight. So, we started out, we flipped our first house. We quit my job, and then I had no leads. I had no plan. Like I was too busy at my job to like do anything. So, I quit my job so that I could start the process of finding deals and those types of things. And then we basically just did like one at a time for a little while. And we really went after kind of like high margin deals is, what we like the really worst of the worst flips that we could make the most amount of money on. And we just kind of handled it with me and Liz and a couple of guys that were a crew. We had 2-3 guys that were our in-house crew, and we just handled all of it. No idea what we were doing as far as like business, like bookkeeping and like those, like, it was really a mess. Eventually, we wound up getting involved in the 7-figure flipping community. We went to our first event out of Flip Hacking Live, and we realized we got to hire somebody. Like we actually have to hire somebody if we want to do, like we want to scale, And so we hired Liz's sister, she's an amazing woman. Definitely not what we needed at the time. And it was, anyways, we learned so much through that. It was a great, awesome experience. Love her to death. Great relationship with her to this day. But, anyways, she, so that was our first like hire. And then, we kind of slowly just started trying to figure out how to hire people, fumbled our way through it. I look back to the people that we've hired and how terrible of an interviewer I was and how terrible of a boss I was, and anyways, it was just a process. It's just like one thing at a time. Like you just got to get reps under the bar, right? Like you can read about business, you can read about hiring, and you can figure out the best hiring process. But until you've interviewed like 100 people, you have no idea. Like if you interview 5 people, you're not going to have nearly as much experience if you interview 100 or if you interview 1,000, right? And so anyway, so it was just like it was a process over the years. After a few years of doing flipping, we started to do new construction. So we had done really large renovations. I was very comfortable with basically entire gut jobs, building additions, those types of things. Because again, our background is construction. Like this is what I know. And so for me, it was always, hey, I would love to dabble in the new construction if I had the right opportunity. I could never really quite figure out how people made the numbers work. But I said, hey, if I ever get some lots in the downtown area where I know that I can sell it for really good really good high price, I'll go for it. And so that's what we did. So we had an opportunity where we could build 3 houses and flip one. So we flipped the one in the middle, and then we had 3 other lots, and we were able to do that. And it worked, and we made some money at it. And I said, we really like this. It was definitely a longer time period. It was something to get used to. Like, hey, it's a lot more in the planning phases versus a flip. You can kind of walk in and say, okay, we're going to rip and tear, and we're going to come up with our plan on the fly and, adapt. There was definitely a significant amount more preparation that goes into building a new construction house. So the timeline's way longer. But that was kind of how we got started. And that was back in 2019. So that was like a 4-year process to get there. So 2016, I quit my job. 2019 is when we started building houses. And then we kind of did both side by side. Like whenever we had the opportunity for more lots, we'd build houses and we'd do flips. And at that time, we were probably doing like, I don't know, between 6 and 12 a year of between flips and new construction, but they were smaller in scale, like $400,000 houses, $500,000, $300,000, that kind of thing. We started 22. We started transitioning, and we said, hey, we really are going to probably want to do mostly new construction. Like, who do we want to be? Like, what can we be the best in the world at? And we were really good at doing good quality jobs. And we were also really good at doing, well-designed houses. And so we kind of said, hey, I don't think that we're going to do flips and new construction at the scale that we want. Because I've kind of always had this vision of building a larger company, building a machine. And as long as I'm involved and kind of at the helm and kind of in the day-to-day grind of it, then sure, we could probably do some flips and do some houses, build some new construction. But it wasn't really going to be built like building a real machine. So we kind of made the decision to transition out of flipping a couple of years ago. And so we've been doing exclusively new construction since. And through that time, it's been a ton of learning what it takes to actually run a business and not just have a job, right? So kind of working through the quadrants of being super involved in the day-to-day to, okay, now I'm hiring people to actually run a business and make decisions and create strategic plans and those types of things. And there's been a lot of challenges that came with it, but it's been good. And so that's where we're at now. Now we're doing about one house every, I would say rewind a little bit. Through that whole time, we picked up some short-term rentals. We picked up a small multifamily. We started doing some capital raising for some large multifamily syndications. And so we've got like 194 units that we owned out in like Texas and in Ohio. And this whole time I'm kind of like ping-ponging around the real estate space, all the while I'm doing like new construction or flipping and then dabbling in some new construction, but like ping-ponging all over. And then just realizing like we have to focus. We're not going to ever be really successful in any one thing unless we actually spend the time to focus, because it was just taking energy in all these different directions. And so that's really kind of was a part of the process of, okay, let's wrap this project up. Let's wrap that project up. We're not going to go out and do any more big, large multifamily acquisitions. We're not going to do this or that or whatever. Sounds fun and exciting and all this stuff. We're going to focus and we're just going to be really boring. And we're just going to do one thing and we're going to just try to do it really, really well. And so that's kind of what we started focusing on, just new construction. And then we started trying to scale too fast. And we didn't have the foundations built well for the new construction, started hiring people to build for that, to prepare for that scale. We were taking money and dumping it and in preparation for that growth. And what we learned was if you don't have a good foundation, you can't build very high, right? Like you're not going to go very far before that starts to crumble. And really, if you don't fix those problems early on and you try to scale, you're just scaling your problems and you just have bigger problems. And so anyway, so we kind of taken, through that journey, we've had some hires, we've had some fires, some team turnover, transition. And now we're kind of back at the, hey, let's like refocusing on building the foundation, making sure that we're doing a really, really good job. And so that's kind of where we are now. So we do about one house every other week. We put out about a house every other week. Steady Eddie. It's boring. It's consistent, but it's going to make a lot of money. And we're going to do a really stinking good job at it, because our goal right now is to make sure that we are honed in on our processes and our plans are going to be rock solid and our budgets are going to be dialed in and we are going to be like rock stars at this. It's like, hey, if we can do 26 a year phenomenally well, then that's going to give us a much better foundation to grow later. And my team's hair is not on fire, because when I'm just like, hey, we're going to do 60, like everybody's running around like chickens with their heads cut off, and I create a lot of stress in my company.
We tend to do that. Dude, I love that. And there's so much good stuff you said in there. I'm going to attempt to highlight as much of it as I can. But one of the things that really resonated with me is, looking at your company, because we've got to have several conversations. I can see, not in comparison, but yeah, sort of in comparison to like what I'm doing, where I'm at. And then, you're ahead where you were and where you are now and kind of where I'm headed. And one of the things that I did about midpoint this past year, it sounds like similar to something that you'd already gone through, where I said, we're doing a lot of stuff and we're making money, various different margins on all these things. Like, what do I want this company to be? And I sort of made the realization that I thought I wanted the company to be something that I actually don't want it to be. And what I mean by that is you're familiar with like doing real estate deals. There's different ways of doing deals, and they all require different strategies and a different type of team, different emphasis, different skills. And basically I was at this point where I was like, okay, I can look at this company as the more of a transactional business, meaning like we're focused more on like inside sales, building an inside sales team, our marketing, our sales process, and tighter, faster cash conversion cycles, smaller amounts, higher volume. And that was sort of one of the models. And then the other model was like, hey, let's focus more on sort of a longer cash conversion cycle, less deals, higher profit margin. It's going to require us to do a different style of flip that we've done some of them, but like, yeah. And I was kind of like looking at these two, and then you have the whole, well, why did I get into real estate in the first place? And that was to actually own assets. And so I was like at these various different crossroads, and I was like, I used to view the company as the asset itself, and it was this thing that I was trying to build. And I think that I've realized it is just a mechanism and a vehicle to help us get into some of these awesome deals, to make money for our investors, to develop our community, and like all these other things that we wanted to achieve. So we started to hone in more on that. And what I realized is now I was like, okay, well, now I have to sustain longer cash conversion cycles. And it started to shift and change all these things. And so I see that unfold in my journey now, but I hear how it unfolded in your journey back then. And I think what's really cool is I think a lot of people would be in a position where they can't make the decisions that you made, meaning like you made a decision, hey, we're gonna do new construction, new builds on these two lots, and we'll flip the one in the middle. Well, like if your cash burn is $40K a month and you got 1 month of reserves in the bank, like you're setting yourself up for failure. But if you've built some of the skill sets that you have built, and you learn how to live off of $4,000 a month, and you have $40,000 in the bank, then you're set up for success. And so that was something I really wanted to highlight there, being the person that like, is very technical, right? Because I realized that, and I was like, oh, I need to change the way that I'm doing some things. So I had to like all of a sudden shake off a bunch of overhead, and I had to, start putting my money in other places, and I had to put our team's emphasis and focus on other things. But what all that's led to now is clarity, and that clarity has allowed me to like just unleash, because I'm not like hesitant to make any decisions. I'm basically looking at the decision I'm making, and I'm like, does this align with what I want this company to continue to be? Yes. Okay, go. No. Okay. Scrap it. Do something else.
100%. Yeah. We had an opportunity to do some ground up construction for an office building that we were going to move our headquarters to. I was very excited about it. And it was really a challenge because it wasn't in our core competency. And it was, I was thinking, well, this is just going to be a Joseph and Elizabeth asset, right? Because when I think about the company, when you talked about transitioning, hey, the company is the vehicle for buying assets. For me, what we realized is the company is the asset. Like that is what I'm actually in. Like that is the asset that I'm going to be building, that I'm going to be putting my blood, sweat, and tears into, because I enjoy it. Like it is fun for me. And so I'm actually not really buying single family rentals or doing any of that kind of stuff, because my asset is the company, and it produces cash, and it's going to have value. And if I wanted to pull, like if I wanted to sell it, I could, like, anyways, that kind of stuff. Right. So we are all on our own path. But yeah, you have to figure out where you're at and not just get like, oh, well, somebody's doing new construction. That sounds amazing. I'm going to go do that. And it's like, well, you don't have the foundation to do that. Right. Or if they're like, I want to do wholesaling. It's like, well, you may not have the foundation for that. Like you have to figure out your own, you really have to look at your own foundation and like figure out what your cards that you have are, and say, okay, now figure that out. And it's funny because you talk about $40,000 a month burn, and I'm like, I kind of chuckle and I think back to the days when I had a $40,000 a month burn. I think we're up to like, yeah, dude, you're up to like 150.
I can imagine.
So, you're like big ships think quick, and it's like, yeah, we don't sell a house for a few months. All of a sudden, you're like, 150, 300, 450, and you're like, that's $500,000. It's just like gone, And so you've got to have you've got to have the foundation to be able to do that.
I love that, dude. I love that. And yeah, to your point, exactly. So simultaneously, I look at my cleaning company. My cleaning company is the asset, right? Similar to like what you just said. And it's not right or wrong, but to highlight what you pointed out, it's a matter of identifying it and then building the foundation. And if you don't build the foundation, you can expect it to topple over. It's just a matter of time. So on that note, what are some of like the key things that through your journey have helped you build that foundation? Like, I guess, what specifically did you find that you were missing when you were trying to scale out super fast? And what have you had to go back and sort of like rebuild that's allowed you to get to where you are now?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I feel like my gut is just to say there's so much that you just have to experience, right? There's a certain amount that you got to get those reps under the bar to figure out what mistakes you're making. Like, you've got to just do it more, right? And so that's been huge for us, is like, look, we just have to do it more and gather more data points and figure out what's not working, right? So that kind of said, some of the big things that we did was our systems and processes we did not have very good processes. We kind of had some processes, but they weren't super dialed in. Now, that's not to say that you should have like uber dialed in technical processes that don't allow you to function and that wind up being obsolete in 3 months because they're so technical, right? But really spending the time to think, to look at what we're doing and say, okay, hold on, pause, step back. Is this the right way to do this? Is this how we should be doing this? And then like taking the time to analyze them and then measuring on them. So that was a big thing. So, we're getting our systems and processes like dialed in now. We're, again, flexible so that we can pivot and change as needed, but repeatable, and we're measuring them with scorecards and every week. And it's like, hey, if there's a new part of the process, we're putting that into a scorecard and we're trying to keep track of that. Is this working or is it not working? Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like initially you tried to scale out on this sort of like faulty foundation, right? Like, you didn't have the right structure. I'm a visual guy, the right structure in place. So now that you've moved past that and you're able to scale out to that one house every other week, what were those sort of missing structures or like faulty structures that, like, in hindsight, you're like, oh, that was the problem. We fixed that, or we put a structure in place and it filled the gap.
Yeah. Right. So another huge part was the people and the team, right? And if you don't, like, you hire the right people and the people build the company, right? And so whenever you have the wrong people on the team, you wind up with, you'll end up with something that you didn't want at the end of the day, right? And if you're not casting that vision properly and you're not bringing the right people on. So, for one of the things for us was we had hired some people that were growth oriented. And I want growth, right? That's huge for me. I always want to be growing. I don't want to be stagnant. I want to continue to thrive and do more. That said, we hired some people that were a core value misalignment, and it was really easy for me to overlook some of those or make excuses for some of those because they were really, really qualified in all of these areas. And we were spending a ton of money on their salaries and those types of things. But the problem was, it was corroding the rest of the team. So the team health was eroding, and you can't, like, if you don't have a healthy team, you can't build a company off of an unhealthy team. Like, it's just not going to work. Right. If you've got an unhealthy team, then they're not committed to their jobs. They don't care about the processes. They don't care about the growth anymore. And you just have total dysfunction, right? So it really kind of all comes back to the team. Now, systems and processes are hugely important, like how you do things, but like the people are the ones that actually execute on it, right? Like, we're not software. We're not like robots or something. Like, there's people that are doing these things. There's a real person on the other side of the phone when you call them and you say, hey, I need you to show up on Thursday to go do the plumbing or whatever. Like, these are all people things, right? And if you start to build an unhealthy culture, then you're going to set yourself up for failure. So we started bringing on, anyways, long story short, we brought some people on that had some core values misalignments, and they started bringing on people that were very growth oriented, could scale. But for us, quality is a huge piece of what we do. And so when we started bringing on subcontractors that the quality was just not there, we were like, hey, this is an issue with quality, or their service, or they were unethical, or they were whatever. And I was like, no, we can't do this. But by that time, I had kind of let, these were high paid people. I had hired them to help grow the company. And I had kind of like, I had to come to a point where I said, hey, you've got to handle it. Like, I've got to step out enough. And they were saying the same thing. They're like, hey, you're like, give us space. Like, let us do our thing. And I kind of took my eye off the ball and really didn't focus on the core values and the cultures nearly as much as I should have, and been like hard lined with it. And, anyways, wound up building a really unhealthy team, bringing in a lot of subcontractors, wound up making a lot of excuses. Anytime that we had an issue, there was always an excuse for it. And I'm like, no, one of my core values is ownership. Like, it's all my fault. Right. And so when I hear people making excuses, that's a really big problem. Like, I'm like, okay, what is going on? I do not like that. And there was just excuse after excuse after excuse. And I'm like, why am I allowing this? Like, I know that these are just excuses, but when you're paying as much as we were paying, anyways, it was my fault at the end of the day. It truly was. Like, I overlooked a lot of those things. So, I think that was probably the biggest thing was I was focused on the growth in the numbers. And even though as a part of my, mission statement, we want to build one of the best new construction companies in the country. Like, eventually I'm not looking to be the biggest. I'm not looking to take on D.R. Horton or any, whatever. Like, that's not what I'm interested in. But I want to be, like, hands down one of the best places to work in the country. I want to be amazing quality, incredible designs. And I want people to know, I want people lined up at the door saying, like, when there's an opening, I want to work there. Right. And the problem was I didn't cast that vision and hold people accountable to that part. And I let myself get too caught up in the numbers and the growth. And hey, these people have built bigger companies before, and they were a part of fast growing organizations, but the culture was just toxic. And then there was just bullying. And then there was like, control. And there was all this stuff that just kind of eroded the health of the team. And that was a huge mistake on my part. So kind of going back to that foundation, the team is the foundation, right? And so we had to let those people go in July. It was actually a husband and wife team. And it was a huge learning experience. And then me and my wife had to jump back in, really, put in the 16-hour days again, write the course, get houses that were stuck, get them unstuck, rebuild trust with the team. And, what's incredible is, like, when you've got the right team, they really kind of step up in those times of, like, they step up during those times. Right. And so because they saw us, make those decisions and say, hey, we made the tough decisions and said, these people are no longer part of the team. Like, we're going to be growing, without them, and we're going to get back to our roots and, like, what's important to us, and, like, honoring Christ and advancing the kingdom and being good to people. And, like, we're not going to yell at people, and we're not going to treat people this way. And here's the company that we want to build. The team really stepped up, and you could see everybody, the fact that all the right people who were getting exhausted and getting burnt out by this kind of this cancer of this toxic culture that was being spread from these people, they all kind of stepped up and did what was necessary. And so it was just amazing to see, like, you just swap out some leadership. And I'm not saying that I'm the best leader and that it was because of me that I jumped in, like, but just removing the toxicity allowed the rest of the team to kind of flourish and step up. And so now we're kind of focused on, we're going to make sure we're bringing on the right people, that everybody knows exactly why we're here. They know how it's an acceptable way to talk to people, how's not like, just the basics. And you know what? At the end of the day, for me, like, I want to build a big company I'm still very growth oriented, but I realize that I'm not willing to do it at the expense of who we are and our core values, right? So, like, if I can only build 26 houses a year ever and treat people the way that they want to be treated, and be able to honor Christ with it, and be able to, treat my employees really, really well, and all of these things, right? If we start having to sacrifice those in order to grow, then I'm not willing to grow, right? So, that's what I'm focusing on, is making sure our culture is good, making sure our trust is there, making sure everybody's aligned on the mission, and then subsequently focusing on the inputs, not the outputs, right? So, like, there's the touchy-feely culture side of things, and then there's the physical, like, hey, we're putting in the inputs of how many plans we're creating and those types of things. So we're focusing on the culture, and we're focusing on inputs. And it's like, hey, if we do a really good job with our plans, and we do a really good job with our subcontractors, and we do a really good job with building our schedules and our budgets, and all we have to do is focus on the inputs, the outputs will take care of themselves. And we were focused too much on the outputs. So we wound up like tripping up ourselves because we had, too much of a focus on the growth and the numbers on the backside. And we were putting projects into the pipeline that weren't ready. We were doing, hiring people that we never should have hired to do jobs because we're like, well, we need somebody right now. So let's just hire that person, right? A lot of those types of decisions were made versus, culture, building the right bench, focusing on the inputs, letting the rest take care of itself, So that's kind of our shift in focus right now, or what we've been working on. It's been really, the last 7 months or whatever has been an incredible shift in the company. And now we're actually producing, a house every other week, and they're good houses and they've got good plans, and they, the team is healthy, and it's been a long road, but that's been a couple of the learning lessons, I guess, there. So,
man, I love that. There's so much there to unpack. And just to clarify, where you're at, so say July, you let that team go in July, but where you were at then, like you've surpassed that now with better quality, more efficiency, a happier team, better culture, better climate. Like it hasn't been you just some put a Band-Aid on the problem, you've kind of figured it out. You very, very specifically identified the problem, found the solution, and you've just surpassed where you were before.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. We were in the middle of a dumpster fire. Like, to be clear, like it was not pretty. Like it was a dumpster fire. So, and we were spending a lot of money on the dumpster fire. Like we were throwing money away. And so, we weren't making progress. We weren't putting houses in the production that were good quality. Everything was getting stuck, and it was just a total nightmare. And, at the end of the day, it was my fault. Like I didn't have the stuff in place properly to make sure that we, were bringing on the right people, that we were holding people accountable to the right things, that we were not letting issues. It's my fault, right? All of it is. But yeah, now watching the team, like removing the cancer, removing that and really focusing on the right inputs, the team has, so with less people now, we're doing significantly more.
Yeah.
And it's better. Like hair is not on fire, and it is more streamlined, and there's better quality, and the subcontractors and the vendors are happier. Not to say that we're not without issues, because we still have plenty of issues, right? Like there's always going to be issues. There's always things always problems to solve. So I don't want to make it like it's perfect now, because it's definitely not. But we are way past where we were production wise. And we were focused on, at that time, we wanted more production. And we were just not hitting it at all because of these foundational issues. And then we go back and focus on the foundation, not really worried about the production. And we just are doing way more in production now. And the houses that we're doing too. So to be clear, like 26 houses a year, it doesn't sound like a lot, but those houses are probably on average around $1.1 million, right? So like a blend, right? So maybe like $1 to $1.1 million. So in our area, that's a pretty decent sized house, 35 to 4,000 square foot, like very high quality finishes. Like there's a lot in there. They're very custom looking, there's a lot of moving parts. These are not like 1,300 square foot ranches that you're just like plopping out. That's a totally different story. They're very, very easy. So the amount of people and the thought and energy that's required, like it's a lot of work that goes into building one of these houses. And so, when people realize that, you're like, wow, we are actually producing quite a bit. I mean, so we're talking, probably $26 to $30 million worth of volume this year. Like that's a decent amount of stuff going on for the team that we have, and focusing on the right things,
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for highlighting that, because you're absolutely right. Like, new construction is not just new construction. Like not all new construction is created equal. Right. So to your point, like, this isn't, this isn't Ryan Homes in its infancy. Like you guys are a completely different type of home builder, right?
Yeah, I just think people might hear that and they were like, 26. That's not that big of a deal. Like but well, it's a little bit different. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. So to see the team step up and to do more with less team, just like a healthy team, is like really like that's the focus. Like just building a healthy team. It's my goal.
I love that, man. And it's so crazy because a lot of times, we've said it on this show before. A lot of my guests have. I've talked about it, like how important core values match is. And even in my background in the military, coming from the special operations community, like we hear these things. This wasn't new to me when I got into business. And so when I started out helping grow our cleaning company, I was like, core values match, and what I found was the mistake I was making was we'd qualify people, but we weren't, this is before we were doing like behavioral interviews and things like this, based on like, basically like them telling us like, yeah, we're a core values match, right? And so there was a mismatch between who they said they wanted to be, who they said they were, and then what they were actually doing. And so we put that emphasis on core values match. And then we realized like these guys are not a core values match, right? And so then I kind of went the opposite direction. And this was over a period of years. And I was like, man, maybe I put too much of an emphasis on there. Like, I just need somebody who gets results. And I actually started letting my foot off the gas. I was like, pressing on that issue. I was like, are they growth oriented? Like, they're kind of growth oriented. Like, nobody's going to be growth oriented like we are. Like, one of our core values is train daily, right? So that's sort of like somebody who's growth oriented is going to train daily. Like, they want to build, right, on themselves. And it'd be like, well, they kind of embody that's good enough, right? And then that led to exactly what you just said, where I think the final like pain point to the point where I was like, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I don't care if it takes a year to hire somebody. Like, I'm not doing it. Like, I got to figure this out. Right? And realistically, it's not going to take a year because fire's going to be under my butt at some point and I'm going to figure it out. I'll figure out what I'm not doing and fix it. But the reason I got to that point was because similar to you, we did more gross profit than we have any other year this year. We did more deals. Like, everything was great on that end. Less profit margin, barely any more net profit. Our quality, from my perspective, we had significant issues where I had to intervene with our customers. And I was so disheartened on the way our team had handled these situations. We had other investors like saying things about us, like just all this stuff where I was like, this is not Simplify Real Estate. What in the heck is going on? Started auditing calls, started jumping into conversations. And similar to you, I got a little too far away. But what I found was like, again, I hired for a subpar core values match. And people in the company were operating the way that they naturally operate, which led to decisions that I don't agree with and do not align with our values. And, nothing against anybody who's came into our company and left. But, just very clearly, there is not an alignment in core values. And that led to them building something, to your point, building something within my company that like I didn't want. And so, I finally was like, okay, I get it. Like, that is totally the wrong call. So you really need both. Like, you need people that you got to have the skills, you got to deliver, you got to get results, inputs to outputs. Like, you got to have the inputs. But they also got to be core values match. And it's so good to hear from your level and your perspective.
Yeah, 100%. Like, it's very, very critical. People don't, a lot of times when you just first get started in business, you're like, I don't even know what my core values are. Like, you put some stuff on a wall and you're like, maybe these are my core values. And then you start to realize like what your core values are over time through, okay, this person seemed to match our core values, but like, what was the rub? Like, were they only here for 2 weeks? Like, we brought somebody on and it was like, they were here, they seemed to have a core values fit, but then like 2 weeks go by and like, we're like, hey, you can't be on the team anymore. Like, sorry. And so we got rid of them. All right, 2 weeks. And we had some really good conversations around like, what is it that was different? And we realized like, hey, we were missing one. Like, we all value growth minds, or we all value like student mindset, right? So we have a Shoshin mindset is basically our last core value of like the beginner's mind. You always look at something like as if it's the first time, like always being willing to learn, constantly being willing to say, hey, maybe the way that I'm doing this is not correct. Like, what was this other, what's this new way to do it? And we realized that this guy was, even though he's great in all these other areas, we were running into these issues. We're like, hey, this is the way that we're going to do this here. And he's like, well, I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to do it my own way. And it's like,
and that was the rub.
It's like, what? Yeah. No, but like we do it this way. Like, we're doing it. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe this is a better way to do it. And, and so I'm like trying to listen to him and understand the way that he did it. And I'm like, okay, well, here's why that doesn't work here. Like, I'm totally open to it, but here's what we're going to, and he's like, well, that doesn't matter. I'm just going to do it my way. He's like, you can do all your stuff the way you want to, but I know how to do it. It's like, okay, sorry. Nope. This is not going to work. Like, if you are stuck in your, like, I'm not willing to listen or learn or be a beginner, like, okay, cool. And so you realize those things over time. Like, it just takes time, and you figure out, like, where's the rub? Why are we rubbing? Like, why is this person rubbing with the rest of the team? Is there a core value, an unspoken core value here? And so it's an evolution. Like, you can't just like sit down one day and like figure out all your core values. I mean, like, there's exercises you can do to facilitate a lot of that. But again, it just comes through like reps under the bar, like figuring it out, having those conversations, bringing the people on, and you're like, I don't know what's going on here. It takes a lot of that, but it's super, super critical to, yes, not let excuses go by about why we're not hitting the numbers. And then two, also, like, you have to stay on your core values. And I didn't realize we were having core values issues until, kind of like under the surface, I could hear like stuff going on. But when I started getting out into the job sites and pulling the thread and started asking, like, hey, from your perspective, Mr. Plumber, like, what's going on? And like, what's working, what's not working for you? And I'm going out to job sites talking with the plumber, and I'm like very removed from that. Right. And they're like, well, do you want me to be honest with you? And I'm like, that's my only expectation. Like, I 100% expect you to be honest with you. Yes. He's like, you've got some issues in your office. I'm like, really? What's going on? And blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden it starts going. And then I'm like, go to my siding guy. And then I go to my framer. And then I go to this person and that person and this person and that person. I start pulling this thread. You realize, wow, I'm getting spoken to one way because I'm interacting with my, C-level executives, I mean, quote unquote C-level, like, you're still a small company. So it's kind of funny that I say that, but these high level people, and I'm getting one conversation face to face with them. And then I'm talking with everybody else in the field, and it's like, no, it's very, very different out here, and realizing, hey, this is where there's some core value misalignment. So like, you can't get too far removed. You still got to like check in, check up, like be on top of it. You've got to build that into your schedule. It's easy for me to be, I'm a very natural, like I say natural. I'm a delegator. I'm on to the next thing always. Like, once it's out of my mind, I'm gone. Right. So building those things in my schedule to slow down and actually inspect the things that I say are important to me, because I'm already on to the next thing. I'm like, no, we already talked about that. So like, we're good. We treat people well, right? We talked about it. And so I'm on to the next thing, but now actually making the phone calls and saying like, hey, I'm just checking in. Like, how's the team treating you? Like, what's going on in your world? Like, how is your interaction? And just doing that, it is very enlightening,
Yeah, for sure, man. That's good. Because you've narrowed it down to one single problem, but it really is multifaceted. I mean, part of the reason, like you had said, it sounds like, from my perspective, that you weren't like quite aware that it was a core values problem was because you had, naturally you're trying to do your job. So you're getting, more and more, distance, right? But you then had to kind of close the gap to try to like solve that problem. And so, man, I'm glad you highlighted that as well. All right, Joseph. So, man, make it through that issue. Now you guys are firing on all cylinders. You're looking to build, like you said. I mean, and you're an entrepreneur. We both know this. Like, nothing's perfect. There's always going to be problems. But like, from your perspective now, that was a very distinct problem that you guys solved and moved past. And now you're on to continuing to build. What is on the horizon for you in the future? Like, where are you guys headed? What's sort of your vision there as we prepare to wrap up here?
Yeah. So, okay. So the vision right now, the only thing that I'm allowed to talk about with my team is 26 and 25. That's the only thing that I'm allowed to say to them, according to my wife, right? Because she's like, do not tell the company that you're like got these big visions about all these things, because like everybody's burnt out on it. Like, we're tired of it. So right now it's 26 houses and 25, right? Like every other week, steady Eddie. That's the focus for now, right? Beyond that, it is to grow. Like, I want to grow, regionally. We want to be, again, not the best. I'm not looking at being the biggest, but we are going to be the best. My goal is to put out phenomenal houses that are great quality, great design, and I want to have an amazing company to work for. And whether that looks like, my goal eventually is to be producing like I imagine a world where we're doing like 1,000 homes a year. I imagine a world where we have, automated technology, automated construction technologies, like helping to, actually change the landscape of the construction industry. Like I've got ideas for like, hey, how can we solve these industry-wide, like construction industry specific problems where we have labor shortages and cost of materials are expensive and like all of these things, right? So I've got these on the horizon, but I've realized that if I live in that world without building the correct foundation first, then nothing ever gets done and I'm just living in a fantasy world. So for right now, it's focus on the inputs and just do what I need to do. So this year's 26, next year I think will probably be around 40 to 45. And then, from there, I'd like to kind of continue growing and scaling, but so we'll see. We'll stay tuned. We still have a lot of growth ahead of us for sure. Very excited.
No, I love that. Thanks for sharing that, and I respect that so much because, man, Melissa's so smart for pointing that out, dude. It's cool that we're visionaries. It really is, but I do the same thing sometimes. Like, what you end up communicating to the team is, I'm uncertain and I'm going to change my mind at any given moment. And like, yeah, like you have to be consistent in the vision. Like for us, man, I'm reading Tim Grover's book on winning right now. And I'm starting to embrace that part of myself more and more because it really is who I am through and through. And, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I like to win. And the moment I win, I'm on to the next thing. And like, there's literally nothing wrong with that. Like, there's no cessation. Like there's nothing that not a thirst I'm looking to quench. Like it really truly is about just moving forward, winning and moving forward. So, but that being said, you have to control it with your team and you have to help them understand like, what is the vision? What is our focus on until we fulfill it? And then you can kind of talk about what's next as it sort of comes up, and not at the rate that we think and we move. And, that's it, until somebody changes my mind for the time being right now. That's where I'm at. And I've very intentionally done that this year as well. And so I love that Liz said that to you and that's where you're at right now.
Yeah. So yeah, no, it's good. She's, I'll tell you what, that's the secret to my success right there is my wife. She's, you get a good wife to support you. And like, man, that's,
it really is.
She's been the anchor. I'm like the rocket ship that's like flying all over the place. I just imagine her with like this chain and this anchor, just like keeping us like, hey, like stay focused, stay
grounded.
Focused.
That's good. That's good. I agree with you right there. I mean, when you think about it and how much your environment and the people around you can affect you, there is nobody that's going to be closer to you than your spouse. And so like honestly, if you got a spouse that their mind's in the gutter, like yours is going to be in the gutter. You got a spouse that's like strong and well-grounded, like you're probably going to be strong and well-grounded. So I totally agree with that. Cool, man. All right, Joseph, where can our listeners connect with you, get to learn more about what Druther Homes is doing and watch you continue to grow?
Yeah. So right now, just follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook. I've got my personal and the business page. They kind of overlap a bunch. But yeah, Joseph Druther, Joseph Druther 4 on Instagram and Druther Homes on Instagram and Facebook. And yeah, feel free to reach out, message. I'm always happy to chat and help out in any way that I can with people's journeys. So more than happy to try to answer questions and do all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
I love it, man. Okay. Well, we'll make sure we include that in the show notes. Y'all heard it from the man. Thank you so much for tuning in again. Joseph, it's been a pleasure, man.
It's been great. I appreciate it.
Hope to get to talk to you again soon. Until next time.